Welcome to Dungeons & Dragons Simulated Slaughter 3.5 Edition. Battle of the Gods.
All battles are simulated using the official 3.5 edition rules from the Dungeons & Dragons rule set, with every matchup resolved through AI combat simulations, in which both deities' full stat blocks are entered into the simulator and fight each other across 1,000 separate simulated battles. Here is the bracket for deities, trying to advance to the round of 16 in the Battle of the Gods tournament.
Loth.
Iadro.
Why Loth wins. Loth's overwhelming divine magic and battlefield control completely dominated the aquatic god Adro in most simulations. Adro performed best when forcing close combat underwater, but Loth's magical superiority, mobility, and summoned demons overwhelmed him repeatedly.
We Jazz.
Bahamut.
Why Bahamut wins. This was one of the closest opening round battles. We Jas controlled the battlefield with necromancy and arcane power, but Bahamut's durability and divine dragon abilities prevailed. Bahamut's raw survivability allowed him to endure Weejas's spell barrages long enough to close distance and devastate her with divine melee strikes and breath attacks.
Heronius. Garl Glittergold.
Why Heronius wins. Garl's illusions and trickery frustrated Heronius early, but Heronius's divine combat mastery eventually overcame the gnome god. Garl stole some victories through deception and magical ambushes, but Heronius consistently won prolonged fights through superior divine melee pressure.
Elona.
Arif Nul.
Why Elona wins. The closest battle of the opening round. Erithnol's brutality nearly overwhelmed Elona in many simulations. Elona survived long enough in many fights to outlast Erithnol using healing magic and summon celestial beasts.
Obadhai. Keralmak.
Why Obadhai wins. Obadhai's immense druidic power neutralized Kurtulmak's ambush tactics and traps. Kurtulmak managed wins primarily through underground ambushes and poison traps, but Obadhai's battlefield-scale magic dominated most encounters.
Olidamara. Tiamat.
Why Tiamat wins. Olidamara's unpredictability stole several shocking victories. But Tiamat's sheer destructive power was too much. Ollidamara's stealth and illusion tricks worked occasionally, especially in terrain-heavy maps, but Tiamat annihilated her in direct combat.
St. Cuthbert.
Farlangen.
Why St. Cuthbert wins Farlang's mobility and evasiveness kept him alive in many fights, but St. Cuthbert's divine discipline eventually cornered him. Farlang excelled at ranged harassment and teleportation tactics, but lacked the finishing power to consistently defeat St. Cuthbert.
Hextor.
Yundaya.
Why Hextor wins Yondala's protections and defensive magic made her difficult to kill, but Hextor's relentless offensive pressure broke through. Yondala prolonged many fights through shielding and support magic, but Hextor's aggressive tactics wore her down over time.
Here are your deity matchups for the round of 16 bracket.
Bakab.
Loth.
Why Bakab wins. This matchup became an all-out magical war between two of the deadliest spellcasters in the tournament. Loth's chaos and demonic summons caused major problems early, but Bakab's supreme mastery of arcane magic gave him the edge. Loth stole victories through ambush tactics and demon swarms, but Bakab consistently dismantled her magic with superior arcane control.
Vikna. Bahamut.
Why Vecna wins, one of the closest battles of the tournament so far. Bahamut's divine dragon durability nearly overwhelmed Vecna repeatedly, but Vecna's forbidden magic and battlefield manipulation barely tipped the scales. Bahamut dominated direct combat exchanges. Vecna survived primarily by controlling range and teleportation.
Moridan. Erroneous.
Why Moradin wins. This became one of the most brutal melee-focused fights of the round of 16. Both gods excelled in martial combat, but Moradin's legendary resilience and divine craftsmanship powers eventually wore down Heronius. Heronius won faster battles through aggressive pressure, but Moradin dominated prolonged fights where his defenses and divine endurance became overwhelming.
Nerol.
Iflana.
Why Nerul wins. Ilana's healing and nature magic helped her survive longer than expected, but Nerul's death powers were simply too overwhelming. Ilana performed best when using terrain and summoned creatures to stall Nerul. However, once Nerul closed distance or landed major death spells, the fight ended quickly.
Pelor. Obad High.
Why Pelor wins. Obad High's battlefield-scale druidic magic created major challenges, but Pelor's divine radiance and overwhelming holy power eventually prevailed. Obad High won many environmental battles through attrition and elemental pressure, but Pelor consistently overpowered him in direct magical exchanges.
Crush!
Tiamat!
Why Tiamat wins. This matchup produced absolute chaos. Groomsh's brutal aggression overwhelmed Tiamat in several simulations, but her overwhelming destructive versatility narrowly carried her forward. Groomsh performed best when forcing close combat quickly. Tiamat dominated whenever she maintained distance and cycled elemental breath attacks.
Krellin. Saint Cuthbert.
Why Corellin wins. Corellin's combination of speed, sword mastery, and arcane spellcasting proved too versatile for St. Cuthbert. St. Cuthbert survived longer in defensive engagements, but Corellin repeatedly exploited openings with magical mobility and devastating precision attacks.
Cord! Hextor!
Why Cord wins. The most violent matchup of the round of 16. These two war gods tore through each other in nearly every simulation. Hextor controlled technical combat better, but Cord's overwhelming physical power and storm-enhanced attacks narrowly secured the majority of victories.
Here are your deity matchups for the quarterfinals bracket.
Bokub. Vikna.
Why Bokub wins this battle became the most devastating spellcasting duel of the tournament. Entire realities collapsed during some simulations as the two greatest masters of magic unleashed godlike arcane power. Vecna actually won many early simulations through surprise magical combinations and devastating death spells. However, Bokub adapted more effectively over extended engagements.
Moradin. Narrow.
Why Nerul wins. This matchup turned into a war between divine endurance and pure death itself. Moradin survived longer than nearly anyone else in the tournament, but Nerul's relentless death magic eventually wore him down. Moradin dominated direct melee exchanges and frequently forced Nerul into defensive positioning. However, Nerul consistently gained advantages in prolonged battles.
Pelor. Tiamat.
Why Pelor wins one of the largest scale battles in tournament history. Entire landscapes were annihilated during simulations as Pelor's radiant power clashed against Tiamat's catastrophic elemental destruction. Tiamat won most fast-paced offensive battles. However, Pelor consistently gained control in longer engagements.
Corellin Larian. Cord!
Why Corellin wins. This was the fastest and most athletic fights of the quarterfinals. Cord's overwhelming physical strength nearly secured the upset repeatedly, but Corellin's precision and magical versatility narrowly carried him through. Cord dominated whenever he cornered Corellin in close combat. Corellin survived by constantly repositioning, combining swordplay with spellcasting.
Here are your deity matchups for the semifinals bracket.
Bakab. Nerul.
Why Bakab wins. Nerul entered the battle with one of the deadliest offensive arsenals in the tournament, but Bakab's absolute command of magic proved nearly impossible to overcome. Nerul won most of his battles by landing devastating death magic early or forcing Bakab into prolonged attrition fights. However, Bakab consistently adapted after surviving the opening exchanges.
Pelor. Colon Lalarhian.
Why Pelor wins. This matchup became a clash between overwhelming divine radiance and unmatched agility. Corellon's speed and spellblade combat pushed Pelor harder than almost anyone in the tournament. Corellon won many battles by constantly repositioning and avoiding Pelor's strongest attacks. However, Pelor consistently gained advantages in prolonged fights.
Here is your deity matchup for the finals bracket.
Bakab. Pelor!
Why Bakab wins Pelor's radiant power. Healing and divine defenses made this championship extremely competitive, but Bukob's supreme control over magic gave him the final edge. Pelor won many battles by surviving Bukob's first magical assault and dragging the fight into a long war of healing and radiant pressure. Bukob won more often by controlling the battlefield early.
Here is your Battle of the Gods tournament champion, Bukob.